With so many people that are new to gardening, we thought we would help take some of the guesswork out of what plants pair well together. Hi, I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and we are going to be looking at Easyscape gardens today. If you are new to our channel, we welcome you to subscribe, and we really do invite you to subscribe because we will be posting more videos that have value like this that you might be interested in. So with the help of Walter's Gardens, the home of proven winner perennials, we're going to be featuring 10 gardens that combine 3 to 5 plant varieties together. And what it's going to do is it's going to create multi-seasons of interest. So many gardens, all the color is kind of at one time. So your garden's in full glory and then there's not much else going on. So we're going to show you how you can create a garden that blooms from early season till later on in the season. We're going to also look at plants that have successive blooming, meaning that we're going to always try to have something in color, be it flowers or be it foliage color. Also using complementary foliage, so adding color and texture in the garden with foliage color. And then of course growing plants that are similar and have similar requirements, meaning like plants that need full sun or full shade, or plants that are drought tolerant or like to be grown in clay. Just making sure that the gardens that we're creating today, they all will go well together in a space. So in addition, we're going to provide you with simple solutions you may need to your planting spaces. So are you looking for a drought tolerant garden? Are you looking for a garden that attracts butterflies? Maybe you have clay and that's an issue for you. So we're going to be trying to find gardens that will be a solution to the various things that you're looking to do in your gardens. So before we begin, I'll say most of these recipes, and I'm going to give you the plants that are in them, along with how many of the plants you're going to need. Most of these recipes are, it'll say on the diagram I'm giving, but most of them are for like a 5x9 type space in the garden. And the diagram we're going to provide, it's adaptable. So if your space is smaller, just use less plants. Or if your space is larger, you can space the plants further apart or add more plants to the collection. And you might even want to add other plants too. I mean, do you want all 3 to 5 plant varieties? Maybe you want to add some other things in too. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at these gardens, that they are mostly designed for around a 5 to 9 foot garden. So let's go ahead and dig in and take a look at these various gardens here. So the first garden we're going to talk about, it's called Beat the Heat. And this is a garden that features dianthus, Shasta daisies, and ornamental grasses. The dianthus we're going to look at here are the Paint the Town dianthus. So they're a low-growing variety that reblooms. It has semi-evergreen foliage. And it comes in shades of red and fuchsia and pink, kind of more along the red to pink spectrum of color. Very, very vibrant here in Michigan when they bloom. They usually bloom for us in May. And then, like I said, they're reblooming, so we'll get blooms throughout the summer as well. So that's kind of a nice front of the border type plant. Next, we're looking at Shasta daisies. So some varieties that you might be thinking of are Daisy May or Spun Silk. Shasta daisies bloom midsummer and they bloom for weeks. And once they're done flowering, you can give them a light trim or what we call deadheading to extend their bloom season. So bloom with a light trim, you'll get more blooms later on. Also part of this Beat the Heat combination, we are looking at grasses, and we're looking at specifically here a panicum grass, Apache rose, and that gives that garden space late season or late summer interest. So the grass is beautiful all season long, but once you get to the fall, it sends up flower plumes. And another thing with grass is I love the motion that it creates in the garden throughout the summer. This particular garden is best for zones 5 through 9. It's a pollinator-friendly garden in addition to a heat-tolerant garden. And I will say heat-tolerant once it's established. Obviously, if you're planting new plants, we always recommend getting them watered in and getting them established before you go ahead and forget them, okay? So we do want you to make sure you're getting them watered while the garden's getting established, but once it's established, it will be more of a heat. It'll be able to take more of that heat. The next garden we're going to look at It's called Buzz and Bloom. In this garden here, obviously Buzz and Bloom would tell you we're probably focusing on pollinators and flowers. So the first plant we're going to talk about is a Nepeta, and we could talk about cat's pajamas or cat's meow. That's the nice thing with these gardens is, you know, I can give you the plant family and you can choose whatever plant within that family you want. So if I'm talking a purple plant and you're wanting a pink and it comes in pink, these gardens are very versatile. It's just kind of giving you the plant family, and then you can go more specific with ones that you like better than another. So Nepeta. So Nepeta is what gets things going in the spring. It's a nice compact mounding type of a perennial. It blooms like crazy, and if you feel like it's starting to slow down a little bit, just give it a light trim and it'll be back to blooming within probably a week or two. So it's a nice workhorse in the garden as well. Also, sedum is a nice plant that's part of this Buzz and Bloom. In sedum, there's different varieties we carry. The proven winners, we have the Rockin' Grow, Rockin' Low, and Rockin' Mound. Those are 3 different series. Grow are a little bit taller varieties, maybe around 14 to 16 inches tall. Rockin' Low are going to be your ground cover type sedum. And then Rockin' Round are going to be more your low growing but mounding type of a habit. Sedum have great foliage all summer long, kind of that nice succulent type of foliage. And then in the fall, the summer to late summer actually, let's say, is when the flowers start to emerge. There are some sedum that are summer blooming, so I want you to know that there are some summer blooming. But with this combination, we're kind of looking more at that late season color coming from the sedum. And they're a great plant for the pollinators as well. So you've got your cat's meow or cat's pajama Nepeta. That's kind of your probably front or maybe middle of the border. And then you've got your sedum that you can mingle in, but you do need some height in this garden, right? You don't want a totally flat garden. So for the height in this garden, we are talking Nephophia, or also known as, like we call them, red hot pokers. And the nice thing with Nephophia is it's got grass-like foliage even when it's not blooming. So that's really pretty interesting looking. And then you get these vibrant, like super vibrant flower spikes midsummer, and usually for us here in Michigan, they'll last even late into the summer where they just keep sending up these flower spikes. And they're usually shades of orange, yellow, red, or even like a bicolor of any of those colors together. This garden here, the Buzz and Bloom garden, would be hardy in zones 5 to 8. It's a pollinator friendly garden, deer and rabbit resistant, and again, heat and drought tolerant. The next garden, and we get questions about clay all the time. And for me, I mean, I don't understand clay because we have no clay. We have 4 different garden areas that we're planting in. The greenhouse, my house, the Northern Michigan garden, and then the Northern Michigan land. And in none of those locations do we have clay, which is pretty fortunate because there's a lot of clay areas in Michigan and actually really close by us. So we just are blessed with really great soil. But for clay, there is some great options for plants that you can use. First one we're going to look at, it's a Baptisia or false indigo. The Decadent series, there's yellow, there's pink, there's kind of a chocolate, a lot of purple, of course, a lot of different color options of Baptisia or false indigo. They have late spring flowers, and when those flowers are done, the habit of the plant of the Baptisia is really beautiful. It almost looks like a shrub. They get about 3 to 4 foot tall and 3 to 4 foot wide, but it has a really pretty, just nice full shrub-like appearance after it's done flowering in the spring. Another plant for the clay solution garden is an Amsonia. Storm Cloud is the one I'm going to talk about today. Another name for this is Blue Star. The reason why I'm talking about Storm Cloud is because I think this is one of the most impressive. There's a lot of different things about Amsonia that are impressive. So what's really impressive about Storm Cloud, in my opinion, is that as it emerges from the ground, it's got dark black stems. So it's beautiful as it's coming out of the ground. And then as it starts to grow and get a little bit bigger, it has these stunning periwinkle blue blooms. So the dark stems with those bright periwinkle blooms is really a beautiful foliage and flower combination. Later on in the summer, we're going to add some Russian sage to this garden. Denim and lace or sage advice would be two varieties. And even when they're not flowering, they've got beautiful silvery blue foliage. And then midsummer, late summer, we're going to get these beautiful purple lavender blooms, fragrant as well. And then the last flower in this garden, and this is going to be the one that's the focal point, and this is the summerific hardy hibiscus. Candy Crush, Holy Grail, Spinderella, just a couple of the summerific series. So in the beginning of August for us here in Michigan, these plants, they get huge dinner plate blooms. So definitely a flower that people are going to be talking about just because of the sheer size of the blooms. It's definitely a specimen plant. I mean, you can plant many in your garden, but if you're looking for just one plant that's going to wow and is a specimen, the summerific hibiscus is definitely going to be it. So this garden, the clay solution garden, it's hardy in zones 4 to 9 with the plants that I've talked about today. It likes to be grown in full sun, and it likes to be grown, the soil, it can be loose, well-drained soil to heavy clay, so it's really adaptable to just about any type of soil conditions you might throw at it. So you don't have to have clay to plant this garden, okay? It can be grown just about anywheres. And it's a great garden for pollinators. It's heat tolerant, great foliage from spring until fall, and of course the flowers are beautiful as well. The next Easyscape garden we're going to look at, it's called Deer Proof for the Shade. So I know you're probably thinking shade, hostas, deer eat them things alive. Well, the nice thing is with this Deer Proof for Shade garden, there's not a hosta in it. So let's take a look at what's in the Deer Proof for Shade garden. This garden has Pulmonaria. Pink a Blue is one of the varieties that we carry. It's got beautiful silver speckled foliage. So it's green foliage and it's got silver speckles all over it. So even when this plant is not blooming, the foliage is beautiful. But this is going to be one of those plants that's going to start the season off. It's got beautiful pink and blue bell-shaped blooms, and it's a spring bloomer. So unique foliage with beautiful clusters of pink and blue flowers. Next on the list is a Bernera, and it could be Jack of Diamonds or Queen of Hearts or even Jack Frost if you're familiar with that variety. And it could really be any Bernera you might come across. But these are just a few of the varieties that we carry, so I'll mention those. Bernera they've got great heart-shaped foliage. Usually a green leaf with some sort of silvery pattern on it. Big leaves, like really big heart-shaped leaves. So where your Pulmonaria is going to be a little bit more strappier, thinner leaves, these Bernera have really large heart-shaped leaves. They get bright periwinkle blue forget-me-not looking flowers in the spring. So again, beautiful spring blooms, but it's that foliage that's going to give you that interest through the summer. So let's complement that foliage with a little bit more foliage. And this is going to be Heuchera or Corabels. And the one we're going to look at is the Dressed Up Evening Gown. So Dressed Up Evening Gown is a beautiful dark foliage Corabel, really, really ruffled edges, adds a lot of texture, and very complementary with these silver and green of the Bernera and the Pulmonaria. Heuchera's got that foliage that is year-round in many areas, so like semi-evergreen. But in the summer, Heuchera do send up little flower spikes that have, different varieties have different flowers, but they all have a little bell-shaped flower. Some varieties are more significant than others, so I will say that. There's a lot of the Corabels that I just trim the flowers off because, in my opinion, they're not super significant. But there's many varieties that do have beautiful pink and red significant flowers. And the hummingbirds, they love those little flowers. So this Deer Proof for the Shade garden is hardy in zones 4 to 8. Like I said, it's for shade, full shade, part shade if we're talking like maybe a little bit of morning sun, but really this is going to do best in a shady type area. This does grow best in kind of loose, well-drained, semi-moist soils. And I shouldn't say moist because heuchera don't like moist soil, but you don't want it to get too dried out. So let's just put it that way. So this garden has great foliage, and it really it's low maintenance. So something that's pretty easy to care for. So as we're going through these, we're putting up pictures of that are more like a watercolor picture sketch of the garden, and putting up the different pictures of the plants, and then also showing you the landscape design. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, if your space is not that big, dial that design down. Or if your space is that big and you're like, holy cow, Heidi, that is a lot of plants. I can't afford this many plants in that garden. You don't need to. So, we're saying, 4x7 or 5x7, 5x9 foot garden. Take a look at how many plants are in there. And if you need to, cut that number in half. Just know that you'll have a little bit more space between those plants, which is fine. You don't have to have a packed full garden. So just kind of take that look and think, maybe you're somebody that wants an instant gratification full garden, and getting that many plants is perfect for you. But for those of you who maybe have a little bit tighter budget, it's okay to just pick half of those plants or a third of those plants, and just know that you're going to have more space between them, which also can lead for opportunity to adding other flowers and other colors into your garden at a later date. So please don't feel like you need to plant all the plants that we're showing in those gardens. So the next garden we're going to talk about is a deer-resistant Sunscape. I will never tell you a plant is deer-proof, because these deer, they always outsmart us. Just when we think we've got the perfect plant that they won't touch, they get hungry and they eat anything. So we're going to say deer-resistant, meaning these are plants that deer typically do not browse. So deer-resistant Sunscape. The first plant in this one is Nepeta. We've talked about this one earlier in other gardens. Cat's pajamas or cat's meow. And again, this is that plant that gets this garden going in the spring. It's a prolific bloomer. It's a long bloomer. And if you feel, like I said, if you feel like it starts kind of slowing down on its blooms, don't be afraid to go ahead and give this plant a little trim, because it will be back flowering for you within probably 2 weeks. Next on the list is the Dicentra or bleeding heart, called Pink Diamonds. This plant has quickly become a favorite of mine, and the reason I love it is it just blooms all summer long. And I was shocked the first time I saw it. I saw it in a full sun garden, and I thought, they've got to be crazy. A bleeding heart in the full sun? That's a shade plant. But quickly did I get corrected, and this particular bleeding heart is a full sun plant, and it loves the full sun. So Pink Diamonds, it blooms early summer, late spring, all the way through the fall. And if you've watched any of my videos from our garden tours at the greenhouse from last summer, I've often talked about this plant when we've done the garden tour, because it's always in bloom. Next, also in addition to those blooms, it has great foliage as well. So it's got really nice kind of a fern-like textured foliage. So unique foliage interest as well. So also for this deer-proof garden, the Kniphofia again. We've talked about Kniphofia in another garden, and for the longest time, I didn't have Kniphofia in my garden. We didn't grow them at the greenhouse, and once we started adding these Pyromania series in, I started planting them in my gardens, and wow, it was a huge miss for me to not have these in their garden in its early ages. So I'm glad that we've added a lot of Kniphofia now into our gardens. It provides midsummer blooms, and even when before it's starting to bloom, it's got great grass-like grass-like foliage, so nice texture, kind of those long strappy leaves. And then once it starts blooming, it puts out these beautiful flower spikes that are, again, shades of yellow, orange, red, or a combination of two of those colors. So this deer-resistant Sunscape garden is for zones 5B to 9. It likes to grow in full sun locations. It's a pollinator-friendly garden that's heat tolerant and resists the animals that may be in your yard and do some browsing. Also too, once this garden is established, it has low water requirements, so it is more of a drought tolerant garden once it's established. Thanks for watching this presentation on our Easyscape gardens, and hopefully you were able to find some solutions to maybe some gardening issues you might have. For those of you who are new gardens, hopefully this helped give a little bit of inspiration on things that could be planted together. If you have any questions or comments on any of these Easyscape gardens, I would love for you to leave them below. And like I said, if you're new to the station, we would invite you to subscribe so that you can get all of our latest videos as they're posted. And for those of you who are new to Garden Crossings, this is probably the most important part. I've talked about all these plants and you're probably thinking, where can I get them? Well, you can go to our website, gardencrossings.com, and place your order. We're in the pre-order session right now. It's February. So you can go ahead and put your pre-order in for spring, and we'll be shipping these plants to your door when it's appropriate for your hardiness zone. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.